Whenever I have an issue, the first thing I'll do is we'll pick up my rosary beads and I'll turn to Our Lady. I put my career aside and I decided to do some time of evangelization. Pray to Mary, talk to Mary. She will form you into a perfect Christ every single time. Hello, my name's Patrick Reynolds. I'm the Director of Formation in Holy Family Mission here in Ireland. So I was born and raised in a Catholic family. We went to Mass every week. We said our daily prayers. We had lots of holy items and objects in the house. When I would come and go from the house, my mum would splash holy water on us. But unfortunately, we did not have a personal relationship with Jesus. I didn't even know that was possible. My understanding of God was that He lived up in the clouds somewhere. He was this man with a beard who looked down upon us all. But in my own mind and my own heart, He was very distant. He was very far away and unobtainable. Throughout my life, we went to Catholic school. We went to Mass every week. But somehow the faith didn't penetrate. I learned about my faith, I learned about God, but I didn't really learn who He was. I didn't come to know Him very deeply. When I was around 10 years old, my mum started going to a charismatic prayer group, and I saw her faith change. It became very real, very personal. I saw my mum being healed of depression, so I knew that God's power was real, and I knew that He could reach people. But in my head, in my heart, I thought God was only for holy people, like my mum. Although I had seen God at work, and although I knew God was real, I really longed for something deeper than what was being offered. When it came to the saints, I didn't understand their role. I thought they were just people that had died many years ago that lived holy lives. But I didn't think that I was holy, so I didn't think they had anything to offer me. This was particularly true of the Blessed Virgin Mary. I did not understand her role. I didn't understand why Catholics had such a devotion to her. I thought, why don't they just go straight to Jesus? When I left school, I decided I wanted to be rich and famous. I thought that would make me happy. I thought in this world, you have to have money, you have to have fame, you have to have people loving you. And I thought the easiest way to do this would be to become an actor. I went to acting college and eventually became an actor and director. For the first time in my life, I had opportunities that I never had before. I had more money than I knew what to do with. And I spent my money trying to impress people. My whole life was a cycle of spending money to buy things to impress people so I could make more money to buy things to impress people. And instead of feeling fulfilled, I felt empty. I felt like I was a fraud. I felt like my whole life I was pretending to be what other people wanted me to be. I never understood that God had a plan for me. I never understood that God made me the way I am for a reason. I was searching around this time, but I was living a very worldly life. My life was all about parties and drinking and relationships. But even there, instead of finding peace and happiness, I was finding like discontentment. One day my mum invited me to a charismatic conference in Scotland. This was a meeting of thousands of Catholics. And to be honest, I didn't want to go. I thought I had put the God stuff behind me. But mums are really good at emotional blackmail. They can make you do things that no one else can. My mum said, "Pat, I'm going away to do mission work in Africa for 2 years. If you don't come to this retreat, I won't get to spend any time with you before I leave. So I went to this conference not because I wanted to know about God, but because my mum had blackmailed me into it. I'm glad now that she did, but at the time I felt uncomfortable. There were many people, they were singing and praising, and I just felt that they were strange. I felt these people weren't in touch with the real world. And as I looked around the room and judged, suddenly God reached in and showed me something that I had never seen before. There was a priest there, Father Robert de Grandis. He was a wonderful man in helping bringing charismatic renewal into the heart of the church throughout America and across the world. But he spoke about Jesus. He spoke about the faith. He spoke about the Eucharist. He spoke about the saints and Our Lady in such a real and tangible way that for the first time in my life, I understood that God wasn't somewhere up in the clouds, but that He was very close, that He had a plan for my life. I began to understand that God wanted something from me, that He had created me for a reason. So I said my first real prayer that day. I said, God, if you're really there and you really have a plan for me, I need you to help me. I need you to show me in a way that I can understand. That day, as people began to pray, they began to pray the Rosary. And I hadn't prayed the Rosary since I was a very young child. And I joined in with the prayers that I knew. And afterwards they began to sing. And something in my heart began to melt. And for the first time in my life, I experienced the love of God. I was so overwhelmed by this love, I actually began to cry. And I understand now that it was through Our Lady's intercession that I was able to come into the presence of God. I went to Mass that day, but I knew that I couldn't receive because I hadn't been to confession in a long, long time. But I had this great draw in my heart to be closer to God. I spent the next few days and weeks preparing, and I went and made the most honest confession I had ever made. Now, as a child, I used to go to confession regularly, but I don't think I was ever really honest. I used to go in with my shopping list of sins. I would say the same 3 or 4 things every time. But this time, I was really, really honest. And when I experienced absolution, again, I felt that great peace and love of God. And I decided that I wanted more of this in my life. As an actor, it was very difficult to live in the world that I lived in. Every part I was being offered, I had to, in some way, go against my faith. The parts I was being offered, or the things I was being asked to do, or the words I was being asked to say within the role, everything contradicted my beliefs as a Catholic. And even although my faith wasn't very strong, I knew there was something wrong. I was going to Mass every week, but I knew that I needed something more. I needed help, I needed support, because I didn't have any formation in the faith. I knew the prayers that I had learned as a child, but now I knew I needed something more. I started going along to a Pentecostal church where I met people who taught me about the Bible. They taught me how to praise and worship. They taught me how to, they offered me mentorship. They offered me friendship and community. But even although I had all these things, I couldn't let go of Jesus and the Eucharist. So I remained in the Catholic Church. Yet every week they challenged me on my Catholic beliefs. And every week I would go and study my faith. I would study the catechism and come back and have answers for them. Whether they realize it or not, they actually helped me become a better Catholic. They helped me understand why I believe what I believe. But one point that I really had a mental and an emotional block was why we as Catholics had such a devotion to Mary. Why do you pray to Mary, they would ask. Why do you not go straight to Jesus? And this was a question that I already had in my own mind, something I really struggled with. And I asked around, and I found it really difficult. No one could give me an answer that made sense. Of all the saints, I always had a great devotion to Saint Padre Pio. He was a miracle worker, a wonder worker. His life really inspired me to want to be a better person. At the time, Pope John Paul was also the Pope, and I prayed every day for his intentions. And one of the prayers that I had learned as a child was that through Mary's Immaculate Heart, I prayed for the Pope's intentions. And I was praying unknowingly this prayer every single day. But by reading about St. Padre Pio and now St. John Paul II, I found their devotion to Our Lady was such a part of their faith, such a part of their own journey. It had brought them really deep into the heart of Christ and into the heart of the Church. And even although mentally I couldn't understand Mary's role, the witness of these two great men really inspired me to ask the question, if these people are so holy, how could they have it so wrong? I went along to another retreat. This was a Marian retreat, learning about the consecration to Our Lady. I went on this retreat more to find out what Catholics believed than because I wanted something. But for the first time, I think I was really open to listening. These people talked about the life of St. Louis de Montfort, his great devotion to Mary, and how they said she is the quickest and simplest way to become like Jesus. Pray to Mary, talk to Mary. But I still had a mental block. Then the priest explained a story that Louis de Montfort used to share. He said there are two ways of making a statue. One, you take a hard piece of material and you knock pieces off with a hammer and chisel. He said it's hard work, it's a long, slow process. He said the other is you take a mold and you pour in a material that is really soft and pliable, like plaster or plastic, and you pour it in till it fills and then you leave it. And when it sets, you have a statue that is perfectly in the shape of the mold it was in. He said, Mary is the mold in which Christ was formed. Mary's womb is the mold where Christ was brought to fruition. He said, if you give yourself to Mary, she will form you into a perfect Christ every single time. But it requires that you give yourself fully. When I heard this, I also understood it to be true. We prayed the Rosary that day, and this time, instead of just saying the words, I tried to pray the words. I tried to meditate on the mysteries. And something really unexpected happened. I experienced the love of our Blessed Mother. It was like the love of God, and I know it comes from the love of God, but it was different. And she helped me love God in a way that I had never been able to do on my own before. I was so overwhelmed by this love. Again, I was moved to tears, but tears of joy for finding such a wonderful gift. It was like Jesus talked about the treasure in the field, where you'd be willing to sell everything to buy the field so you can keep this treasure. Well, from that moment, I went back to my life of acting, and I decided I couldn't do both. I couldn't live in this secular world the way I did and be a good Catholic. I also knew that people needed to know about the love of God. So I put my career aside and I decided to do some time of evangelization. I came to Ireland for a little retreat to ask God what He wanted. And the first place I came to was the national shrine here called Knock. And here in Knock is a beautiful apparition site where Our Lady appeared alongside St. Joseph and St. John. And also Jesus appeared as the Lamb of God on the altar with the angels surrounding Him. And I understand now that Mary came to lead people to Jesus. Our Blessed Mother's role is to bring people to the Lamb of God.
Remember, oh most gracious Virgin Mary, that never intercession was left unaided, was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful.
At that retreat, I met the woman I am now married to. I met the people who offered me a job doing mission work. I came for a weekend, and that was 20 years ago. I'm still living here in Ireland. My love for the Blessed Mother has continued to grow. But one big turning point for me was learning to pray the Rosary properly. I always found the Rosary very difficult. It was a prayer that I found hard to pray on my own. I always found it easier in a group with other people to remain focused. That wasn't until I went to the national shrine in England called Walsingham. And there's a small chapel with a statue of Our Lady of Walsingham. And I remember asking our Blessed Mother for the gift and the grace to really understand and to be able to pray the Rosary. And something incredible happened. As I began to pray through the joyful mysteries, it was like in each mystery, I understood Our Lady wasn't just Jesus' mother, but she was actually my mother. And in my mind, as I prayed and meditated, each of the mysteries, I could see that I was growing alongside Jesus. So when Mary said yes in the Annunciation to being the Mother of God, she was also saying yes to me. And I was conceived within her womb. And I had this close intimacy with Jesus that I had never experienced before. I remember into the visitation when Mary went to visit her cousin. It was like I was being carried in her womb with Jesus. And John the Baptist was jumping for joy that I was actually part of Christ. When Jesus was being born in the Nativity, it was like Mary was giving a new birth to me, a new life to me. She was saying yes to raising me. In the next one, where she offered Jesus in the temple, she was also offering me to the Father, that her and St. Joseph were taking me under their patronage. And finally, when they found Jesus in the temple, I found that Mary was also finding me. I had been lost, but it was Mary that had been looking for me. I know that my mum's prayers really helped me come back to my faith. And I know that Mary's prayers, my other mother, were really instrumental in helping me come back. Myself and a few others, Father Patrick and Maura Murphy, we founded a house here for young people to come and learn about their faith, to get the formation that maybe we didn't when we were younger. And we called this place Holy Family Mission. We gave it the patronage of Our Lady, St. Joseph and Jesus, knowing that it's through Mary that we really come into the heart of the church. Mary is our mother. Mary is the womb in which we are formed, that we become like Christ. So we have tried to recreate that environment here for the young people. Our Blessed Mother was really instrumental in helping me to find my wife. Not only did we meet in the National Shrine in Ireland, but we worked alongside each other in a movement called Youth 2000, which has Our Lady and the Eucharist as the center. It was in this time I really learned about my faith, but I also got to know this wonderful woman who I later married. On the day we got married, we consecrated ourselves and our marriage and our future children, should God bless us with any, to Our Lady of Guadalupe, who we had a great devotion to. And we really felt such a blessing that day. We jump forward all these years. We now have 9 beautiful children. Each one of them has their own unique faith. Each one of them has their own devotion to Our Lady. And we're really thankful that God has given us such a wonderful gift in our marriage. Now the Rosary is a regular part of my experience of faith. It's such an important part of my faith. I know that our Blessed Mother grants us so many graces through the Rosary. Whenever I have an issue, the first thing I'll do is we'll pick up my rosary beads and I'll turn to Our Lady. St. John Paul II said it's like taking the hand of Our Lady. And I know that she will lead me through any dark times, any troubles that come ahead. I remember one particular experience. I had a falling out with a close friend, and I was finding it very difficult to be reconciled to them. I knew they had wronged me, and I found it hard to forgive them. And this person couldn't see the hurt they had caused me and other people. And part of me wanted to do something about it. Part of me wanted to take vengeance. But instead, I put my hand in my pocket and I picked up my rosary beads. And I had only prayed one decade of the Rosary. I hadn't even prayed the entire thing. And this friend, their countenance changed. They turned round and they looked at me and they said, "Pat, I just realized what I did to you. And I realize how much I've hurt you, and I apologize." And I recognized in that moment the power that Our Lady has to change hearts, to help us to love. And in that moment, I knew that justice was served, and I was able to forgive my friend. We embraced, we reconciled. Mary is such an important part of our journey. She was the means by which God chose to come into this world, and He still chooses to come through Mary. I now understand that we don't go to Mary instead of Jesus, but we go to Mary because Jesus is within her. Mary is called the new Ark of the Covenant. And in the Old Testament, the Ark of the Covenant contained everything that was holy, the priesthood, the prophets. But in the new Ark of the Covenant is Jesus Himself. So when you go to Mary, you're not going to her instead of Jesus. You're going to her so that through her, you can have a closer, more intimate relationship with Jesus. This has been my experience. So when I want to be close to Christ, I always turn to Mary.
My name is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We're looking at the miraculous icons of the Virgin Mary from all around the world. A famous one from Croatia, Mother of Bistrica, is one of these black Madonnas that are seen throughout all of Europe. In this case, it was made around 1400, but it was buried for safekeeping in protection from the Turks. But in 1525, a supernatural light shone upon that spot and they rediscovered where it was buried. In 1588, they had to bury it in the walls again. And in 1684, it was discovered another time. In 1930, she was declared the Mother of Croatia and became known as one of the most famous Marian icons in all of Christian history.
Are you searching for fulfillment? Discover true happiness. Stay tuned to Shalom World.